It's winter, and if you own a cottage right now, you're probably done visiting it for the year. Cottages are one of those things where you can have a ton of fun, lots of enjoyment in the summertime, but in the winter months, they are not the most usable, depending on if it's even a year-round type of cottage. Now, the cottage market has had its major issues over the last few years. People were buying cottages with the idea of renting it out, using it as an Airbnb, maybe living in the cottage because they could do work from home. But work from home is done. Airbnb life has got its restrictions, and you're finding out that owning a cottage is not what it was cracked out to be. We've had you guys in the comment section in a lot of our videos asking, is the cottage market still crashing? So in today's video, I'm going to answer that question for you. I've got 5 different cottages here that we are going to take a peek at, show you what's been happening over the last couple months in the cottage market, whether it's Muskoka, whether it's somewhere just a little bit north or south of there. I've got those options here for us to take a peek at and show you that it is still having its struggles, just like the rest of the GTA real estate market. So the first property we're going to look at is 45 Pine Tree Road in Gravenhurst. This property, as you can see here, did sell for $80,000 less than what it was asking. It was only on the market for 11 days at this current junction of its listing process here, but what I do want to show you is, of course, the details. This channel is about transparency and showing you what's going on the back end of things. So this property, as you can see here, did sell in 2022 for $1.55 million, and we are seeing it sell here in September for just under 1.2. So we're talking about almost a $400,000+ loss by the time you count all your fees, all the cost, and unfortunately, this is a very short window of time. So in 4 years, they have decided this cottage life is not for me. But let's take a look at what a cottage is actually going to offer somebody. So this is a 3+1, 2-bathroom condo, about just under 2,000 square feet as it's got listed here. Nice property on the water. You've got a 2-tier deck here, tons of windows, lots of wood, which is going to really give you that cottagey vibe that you're looking for. Some of us might call this a house, but it is considered a cottage to the people who are purchasing something like this. And you can see some money was put into it, some renovations were done, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out well for these guys here. A loss of $400,000 and away you go. The next property I do want to show you here is at 61 Arts Lane in Georgian Bay. $860 was the selling price, listed for just under $1.1 million for a 4-bed, 2-bath, under 1,500 square feet. Value-wise, doesn't sound too horrible, but let's see the finer details. Of course, that's what we're all about. And here we are. So you can see here that this property was purchased in 2020 for $970,000. Then they tried to sell it at the beginning of 2025, not realizing that the market wasn't going to give them more for their property than 2020. And then they started to play the game where it's time to really lower the price and get it sold. So they ended up taking a haircut here of $100,000 on paper, but commissions, all the other stuff, of course, it's going to exceed that number. And let's take a peek at what that one actually looked like in person as well. A little bit of a different type of property than the previous one we just saw. More rustic, more of a cottagey vibe. Obviously, significantly less on the pocketbook as well. But when you're looking at something like this, still, for almost $900,000, it's probably not going to excite most people. And as you can see here, the exterior pictures are last because it really doesn't say come by me as much as some of the other almost house-looking cottages are actually screaming at you with all the new renovations. So the next one I do want to show you is at 2982 Muskoka Road, and you can see this one sold for $1 million flat. It was on the market for 0 days. That's not the case because it was actually on the market for quite a bit longer. But I want to show you what happened here because this one to me was extremely interesting. It's not a loss per se, but I just want to show you what actually transpired here in the cottage market. Now you can see 1.1 was that sale price, but what's important to note is that's not where they actually started. Check this out here. So this started with a bunch of different leases, so it was rented out for a time being, but it started in May at 3.790. So almost $4 million. They continued to lower the price as time went on here. They got to that 3 point, and then they were not obviously getting the interest that they wanted, and they wanted to get it sold. They dropped this one all the way down to $1.5 million. Something transpired here, and it immediately got relisted 7 days later and sold for $1 million. So we can only imagine what happened in this situation. Maybe the person couldn't close. Maybe it was the seller had a family sale. Who knows? But look at how much they've adjusted this. $4 million, selling it for $1 million. We don't know what happened on the back end. We don't know what kind of agreements that they did have. But take a peek. This is an 11-bedroom property. So honestly, very nice. I'm a fan of all the light colored wood, nice bright spaces. It's not fancy by any stretch, but it is a property that definitely is being lived in and is more of a home space here. So as you can see, there are multiple different properties on this one piece of land. So you got your boathouse plus your regular cottage here, but this is a good example of adjusting according to the market. You thought you could get $4 million somehow based on your real estate agent's suggestion, possibly, or maybe you were just going rogue and saying, my home is worth this and I will not sell it for a penny less. And then you see people adjust according to what the market actually will pay for your property. This is a great example of how the cottage market, yes, it's gone down in value, but it's a great example of how to sell a property if you have mispriced it. You mispriced it out the gate. You have to make those adjustments and get it back on track to make sure that you can actually sell your property and not just let it sit there on the market, which happens way too often. The next property I do want to show you guys here, it took a little bit of a hit, $400,000, $390,000 hit. Obviously at a $3 million price point. Some of us may not have the sympathies here. I understand that. That is outside of the realm of the conversation here. It just shows you that the cottage market is suffering just like the other markets. Now, let's see what transpired on this one here. So as you can see, this one was originally listed at $4,095,000. So this is very much like the last one where it wasn't necessarily bought during COVID. It was owned for a little while here, but they had to make these adjustments. And they went all the way from $4 million all the way down to finally selling it for, what is that, $1.2 million less than what they actually started at listing their property for. So trying to find a buyer, even in this price range where you've got people who are looking for specific things, is always going to be challenging. It's going to be more challenging because of the price point, but let's take a look at what this type of property did offer. Essentially a house on the inside. We know that with anything that's going to be in this kind of price range, it's going to feel like a house more than anything else. It's not a cabin in the woods. It's not a cottage like most of us would have gone to with our families as we were growing up, where you had lots of bugs. You had to worry about all these other things inside. This is just another home that is on the water. And something like this, right on the water here, is selling for $2.9 million as of this market we're currently living in. It's taken a $300,000 hit, and these sellers adjusted accordingly. So once again, this is a, hey, good for you sellers. I understand it's a $3 million house. So in the comment section down below, I get it. I understand that price point, but these sellers did what they needed to do. They were represented by an agent who probably encouraged adjusting the price, making it more realistic for what needed to happen in this given market. And the market wasn't paying them $4 million, so they ended up going for 2.9. Significant difference, mentally a tough challenge for a seller to list for one price and then all of a sudden sell for $1 million less. Money is not yours until your home is sold. So a fantasy list price doesn't mean you're putting that money in your pocket. Always consider just listing your home at the most reasonable value for what the market will pay. But a cottage is always challenging because you don't have a lot of data to go off of when it comes to these list prices. You may not have another home around you. You may not have the same type of house beside you with the same type of square footage, with the same type of water frontage. So there's a lot of different variables to consider when you are listing a cottage, but adjusting your price and making it sold before it gets cold is extremely important. Not many people are buying a cottage in the winter. Let's just make that very, very clear. And the last one I want to show you guys is at 1067 River Street in Muskoka. Again, was listed for $900. Actually, sold for $930,000. So it sold over asking. So let's see what actually happened here. Why did we sell over asking? Well, you know the deal. That means it was just priced too low. This one was actually sold in COVID time here, in our lovely COVID time. It was sold for, as you can see, $1.1 million. And the lovely thing here is, even though it was sold over list price, it's because they lowered the price here. So it's actually a $200,000 loss that we're seeing in just a 3-year period of time, plus all your fees. So you're talking almost $300,000 in lost cash on this type of property. Cottages, they're still taking these hits. There's some that are better than others, but they are very much like a home. They're losing in today's market because people don't have the money to afford the expensive cottages. Once you pass that threshold of $600,000 to $700,000, the market is really chugging along at a much slower rate than it is for those starter properties. And a smaller cottage might move a little bit quicker, but there's always challenges depending on the location. So let's take a peek. This is what the cottage looked like here. More of a cottagey look from the outside, less fancy. Definitely gives me more of a vibe of something that we would have went to as kids. But let's take a peek of the inside here. There you go. Like, this is more of a mixture of like a cottage and a house, not necessarily fully renoed. And then you've got some parts of it that are very nostalgic with your wood paneled walls here, like you see. The kitchen is nothing to brag home about. Everything is very simple. So this, more like a cottage, still ended up fetching almost $1 million in today's market. But cottages, you are paying for the waterfront. That is one of the biggest expenses with the cottage. It is not necessarily everything that's inside the house. It is what is surrounding you. And that's peace, that's water, that's the nature that you're surrounded by. So I hope this clarifies what's going on in the cottage market. There are still some losses happening out there. There are actually some sellers who are adjusting on the go and making some of these changes like they should. We talk about how to sell your home in so many different videos, and they are actually following through. At least the sellers that we brought up here today, they're following through and making their homes more appealing to the market by changing the price and not letting it just sit there at one price if it's not selling. And of course, there are some of them that we're seeing taking $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 losses, but that is the current market that we're living in. Would you buy a cottage? I personally would not be buying a cottage anymore. Cottages, for me, I would rather just rent, go there for the weekend, spend some time up there with the family, and not have to maintain and take care of a cottage. I have no interest in doing that. Plus the drive of 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on where that cottage is. That's a hard pass for me. I don't want to put my hard-earned money into buying a cottage, but I want to know your opinion in that comment section down below. Would you buy a cottage? Would you pass on a cottage? Or are you just trying to get into the real estate market in general? If you have any questions about cottages, you can reach out. We've got partners that are all up in the Muskoka area that can walk you through some of the greatest deals that are out there right now. But if you're curious about how this video originated, you can always go watch the cottage video that we've got right here.